interesting random walkthrough of some eclectic articles from the Archaeology Museum in Madrid, which is an absolutely tremendous world-class museum, as many of the museums in Madrid are. What I've done here is just take some pictures of some of the things that had kind of wargamey kind of military sort of relevance to them. So it's not everything by any long way, and it's probably pretty unusual for some people if they were looking to do a proper coverage of the whole museum. But this is like toy soldier stuff for an ancient and medieval wargamer. There's a number of fixed exhibitions and a number of kind of temporary ones. The temporary ones when I was there, which was in early summer of 2025, were the main one was about coins and money, which was great because then you get some pictures of some ancient leaders on the back of coins as well. But there were some other different bits and pieces as well. So we'll just roll on, and you've been staring at this for a while. What actually is this one? This is Kulikud of Persia. That's his hat. So that's a bit of a thing. I'm not even sure what this was actually in, but look at the detail on this once you get in close. Pretty cool. You're not going to be doing that on a 15mm figure, probably not even on 25. But there it goes. That's a Persian helmet for you. This one, look at this guy. He's obviously one of these sort of Greco-Roman people. And what I did, just because there was no chance of me actually remembering, I've actually taken pictures of the information sheets. So this was a tetradrachm of Antiochus the 13th. So one of the Seleucid kings, Antiochus, there he is. And what lovely hair he's got. That's what he looked like. That's him. Then some other random stuff. If you want to be Carthaginian, of which there's not much Carthaginian stuff around, but obviously there's a fair bit in Spain through their dominance of that area. So this was again your textbook Carthaginian tannet symbol that you'll see painted onto shields and on shield transfers as well. 4th century BC, made out of bone. This one, you've got grave goods of a Iberian chieftain. This is where it starts to get really interesting, I think. Clearly, it's Spain. They do go big on the Iberians before the Romans, but it's just interesting, and I suppose maybe they've got a political agenda to make them into a more developed culture. But by all accounts, there was a lot of credibility to say this was a very, very developed and sophisticated society, and these grave goods from quite a long time, whatever those. 4th century there. So yeah, here's a bit more detail. 5th to early 4th century BC, 400, 500 years BC. Some very, very good sophisticated stuff there. And then you do start to get more of these other grave goods and bits like this that not armor, just purely decorative, which is again very, very sophisticated. There were some heads of some of the people from there. So this is staring into the face of a Iberian from the 2nd century BC, a large ex-voto head, clearly intended as a portrait. You're looking into the face of someone from the 2nd century BC, a Iberian warrior there. That's the male head one. And then there's a whole set of them. These people have not suffered quite so well. He didn't look particularly so happy. The guy on the right over there, that guy's got, again, fancy hair. But for some reason, this guy's been sculpted with wearing a sort of beanie hat on, I guess. Again, 2nd century, 1st century BC. There they are. Probably high-ranking people. So that's kind of what the rich people look like. And they paid to have that done. So I suspect whoever did that one may not have got any more commissions. But moving on, some other votive offerings, which are kind of sort of soldiery. These are a bit more basic. Warriors' votive offerings left in shrines, left as offerings to the gods. Here they are, usually clothed in typical Iberian weaponry. So you've got little round shields, you've got the sword there, you've got a spear. There they are, and some people on horseback as well. There's quite a number of on horseback. So cavalry must have been a pretty cool thing. He appears to be taking a phone call over on the left, or he thinks he's taking a phone call, and he's probably just stabbed himself in the back of the head with his curved sword, which would be kind of tricky to do. And then here's the video of the famous Lady of Elche, one of the most iconic pieces of sculpture. This almost defines Spain. That bit in the back where I guess you could put your pajamas or something like that if you were storing it at the end of your bed. And this is me walking around it. So that really is quite a thing. Here's a much clearer frontal image. It's a shame. We'll go on to see kind of which bits of it are missing. The inspiration for Star Wars, all of Star Wars was built on Princess Leia and this sort of hair, really, wasn't it? And the effect that had on all sorts of different people. And this is what it is. This is the thing from it. 4th to 5th century BC, long time ago. If you look at the quality of the detail, the amount of money this must have cost compared to some of the other similar grave goods that we've seen earlier on. Clearly a highborn woman, idealized face, loads of jewelry. Would have been actually coloured in like many of these things would have been, but potentially Greek sculptor brought over to Spain and found completely by accident, and brought over here first to the Prado and then to the National Archeological Museum. And what is it? Well, what's the hole in the back? All sorts of different things. Would it have been a reliquary? Could you have burned people's bodies and put their bones in there or something like that? And it could, clearly there's only the top of it. There's a lot more to go. So there's some other theories as well about it. So there's either this bit missing or possibly this bit missing. I think personally the standing up one looks a bit cooler. That just looks a little bit kind of sad, really, doesn't it? But there you go, the Lady of Elche. And then another kind of not quite so impressive but similar sort of idea, which maybe does suggest sitting down was the way it was done. More grave goods here. This is another one. This is the grave at Baza, the Lady of Baza in Granada. Another one. It was used as a cinerary urn for burnt remains. I'm guessing for that one. So lots of grave goods there. All the swords, all the different bits and pieces, fancy pots, all that. And there's lots and lots of these weapons. This falcata, this slightly curved Spanish sword that you do see on figures. So it's a real one. It really exists there. And also the heavy throwing weapon, which the Romans copied, adopted, made their own, very much so. Helmets, cuirasses, greaves, shields, all sorts of different things. And eventually Montefortino helmets and oval shields, which became very Spanish. And by the 1st century BC, not as many weapons there. So maybe people were either keeping their weapons or dying on campaign. But just look at all those, and you can see there was obviously a lot more work went into those as possible. But it's a very distinctive style. For some reason, this was the way it was used in Spain. The curve, the cut. But this one you can see is clearly the forerunner of these ones, particularly the Roman gladius. Another thing that may have been lifted from the Iberians. But the falcata, the classic curved sword, looks like a horse's head. 2 cats' heads, all sorts of different things. Can you see that in this picture? Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, on that end of it. So that's pretty cool. And then some pretty astonishing helmets as well. This one's a little bit more battered. Montefortino helmets, and there's a couple of them made of a single sheet of metal. That is still a very impressive piece to have survived since the 4th and 7th century BC, even if this one's not survived quite so much. And then yet more votive warriors. Clearly there are different sizes, or you could spend more money and get a bigger one, depend on how keen you were on sending warriors with you to the afterlife, I guess. And again, more people on horses, different sizes as well. You've got 10mm, 15mm, 28mm there, all the different ranges that have lasted to this day in the world of wargaming. And what you do get as well is some slightly more basic pictures. It's kind of weird to think that these pictures were being made at the same time as the Lady of Elche, but perhaps that does suggest that she was Greek, and perhaps the Spanish weren't quite as artistic as the Greeks in this one. And again, we all know the Iberians fought as mercenaries all around the Mediterranean. And here's another big urn with, but don't hold your breath for this. It's not the greatest picture in the world, but when you look, you can actually see it. He's stabbed some guy down there, got a spear through him. He's got a spear. He's on a horse. The horse is up there. He's got both legs over one side, or you can see through the horse in some sort of weird way. There he goes, and there it is. The other side, you've got a couple of kind of weirdy shields going on there, and a bit of fighting happening, which is always good for wargamers. More of these falcatas. Still going on, getting a bit more sophisticated this time, a bit more detail on the end of the handle. Again, unlikely to be created at 15mm, I think. And then Latane swords. These are the the Celtic sword. So the Iberians, pretty literally Celts who just moved down into Spain. So, it's not some magic fusion word that means Spanish warriors. They're just Celts, and they use Celtic weapons. So, to be honest, that's great. That means I feel a lot happier about using my heavy infantry Celts in a Spanish army as well. I don't need to make them particularly Spanish. And looking at that, they're using Iberian swords. They're a different tribe from the north, equipped differently. They're not just stood closer together with the falcata. And look at that. That's how it would have been worn, which is the dagger round the waist horizontally to kind of pull that out, stab somebody for it. 4th BC. So that's an interesting one. So if you've got figures that look like that, it's a sword in a scabbard with the handle. It's not a kind of weird metal belt thing. And there it is. Here's some fancy metal belts and belt buckles. Look at again, a lot of stuff on this one. A lot of details survived on some of these. What's going on over there? Yep, you've got all that curvy, twirly stuff going up to here. One tweezers as well, and that may be a different thing. And then this is going back to the money bit. Obviously, it's great, for some of these are sort of shield designs, and it's just a reminder of the owl of Athens, 5th century BC, another tetradrachm. And then there was a whole piece. This is jumping up to pirate world, really. And I suppose I've not really thought the piece of 8 was a currency. It was actually a thing. They circulated around the world. Standard piece. It was even legal tender in China. Pieces of 8. They were real currency. And there's some, I think, pieces of 8 as well. You can see they've got Chinese stuff stamped into them as well. Extra bits, and then replaced eventually by the dollar. The US dollar replaced the Spanish peso quite late, at the end of the 19th century. So pieces of 8 was the standard international currency until the end of the 19th century, which is kind of crazy, really. It's not just a pirate mad thing that's been made up. And but there's a much more kind of imperial Spanishy one. You've got some wargaming type shield stuff for that one if you wish, for sure. 16th century piece of 8. Maybe you cut it into 8 pieces, and it's that's an eighth of one of those. And Visigothic, we always good to try and look for some of the Visigothic stuff. The Visigoths weren't in Spain for that long. There's a few podcasts that you can dig out that generally do say all that sort of stuff as well. But they're kind of tricky to find, and it sounds like a lot of them are actually knockoffs. So a lot of the ones, the Visigothic coin, this one as well, was actually probably made by Seville's Royal Mint. So it's probably a knockoff, but a not good one. So jumping back to pictures of people, there's Julius Caesar. Got a bit of a turkey neck thing going on in there. Proper Roman nose. Got the laurel wreath on it. Sort of a weird Star of Macedon stuff going there as well. But it's Denarius, 44 BC from Rome, and we'll crack through a few more coins with these people. Ptolemy of Egypt, that's I think you'd focus on the hair then. There's quite a lot going on with him facially, isn't there? Is that his tongue sticking out? No, it's not quite. But yeah, that's he's been out in the sun and had a few glasses of wine, hasn't he, really, to get that sort of face. And then you've got the slightly younger Lysimachid, the Lysimachid army with its elephants, with its Thracians. This is Lysimachus himself. Look at that rich, luxurious hair. So make sure you paint all the detail on that one. And he's got horns over his ears. About putting a human being in a space reserved for gods, which is kind of weird. So yeah, he was the first living person to be portrayed on coins. Wow. Okay, so that's actually an important thing, isn't it? So even Alexander and the other ones before him didn't put their own face on it. He was the first big man to say, look, I'm going to be doing that, for sure. And then Demetrius of Bactria, the Bactrians as well, with an elephant's head, completely, wearing an elephant's head crown of some sort, just to make sure that he's a Bactrian. Ideal there. I think that might look a bit weird, but then again, I think I've seen a 28mm figure with that. I think I played against one down in Plymouth a couple of years ago, if you look on the battle reports there. So yeah, interesting kings from the edge of the world, and then some more people. Demetrius of Syria. There he is. A couple of different as he gets an older. So he gets he grows a beard, gets a bit more distinguished, but it's still clearly the same guy, isn't it? But imagine having coins, living long enough to have coins minted of you at different ages. So a Parthian Longbeard. So he learnt that beard from Parthia after being captured and kept hostage for a decade. So then, jumping to the Middle Ages, I think this bit of the museum might have been a bit darker than I thought. So some of the pictures are not as good as they were, but here's some interesting detail. Milan and Florence, 1440, but the actual panels were painted 1450, so that's pretty close. So you've got what is probably some reasonable armor, reasonable heraldry in there. It's a shame it's a little bit iffy, isn't it? That quality of the picture. So probably too dark, but they probably want to protect it. But that's 1440s armor and horses and equipment. Although, yeah, they are wearing pants under there and trousers. That's okay. And then on the other side of the bridge, you get a load more stuff. You get all these guys in the armor. This is real how it should be. Pikemen, all sorts of odds and sods. So definitely worth going to look at some of this. Into the Egyptian bit, there's always some mummies everywhere. This was a whole list of all the different divinities in Egypt. Amun-Ra, Anubis, we know all those, the bull. And then I was just entertained by, there was this guy as well, Bez, from like the Happy Mondays. And nothing like any of the other ones. Completely different. Never heard of Bez before. And there he is. And he's got two maracas. And he probably just stands behind all the other different, royal gods and things like that, who are all looking kind of cool. And he just dances around like an idiot, which is exactly what Bez did for the Happy Mondays. And so, maybe there's a cultural link there going back thousands and thousands of years from ancient Egypt to Manchester in the early 2000s. Who knows? So, yeah, he scared away demons and evil genies from the home. So, yeah, you wouldn't mess with that, really, would you? That would be a bit weird. Or if you saw that, you'd be a little bit worried and you'd go. Then here's another papier-mâché head, as always, 300 BC, but that's from the time of the Ptolemies. So I thought the interesting thing about this was it's still very Egyptian. So it's, if you're doing a Ptolemaic army, there's probably an argument here to make it pretty Egyptian. And then just running through some more of these kind of big wine jars and olive oil jars and things like that, just to pick up some shield patterns and some helmet stuff. Interesting thing, that's a very, very tiny pattern on a big shield. Here's some armor and helmets from it, from that era, from the Greeks. This is battle gear from 500-600 BC, ante Christo. Breastplate, helmet and greaves. Let's have a look. Breastplate, helmet, greaves in the background there. Gone a little bit green, but they're still very, very intact. And here's another one. Again, very, very small, very delicate. Interesting bit with the helmet being worn kind of on the back of the head. You do see that on some figures, but not as many as maybe you should. And then another one. I wonder if that was a painted on eye. You can just about see something there, and that almost, that's got some kind of almost dry brushing bits onto it, which is kind of cool. And but there's many of these in many museums around the world. And then you get to a few more kind of helmets. I think that looks pretty. Was that Roman one? Roman, or is it Visigoths? But did the Visigoths think they were the Romans? So the Visigoths, there's not many grave finds for Visigoths because they weren't normally buried with their weapons. They must have passed it along to other people. So a few different bits and pieces. There's your Visigoth. They're the mystery people from not having many remains left behind. And but there is still some. They've still managed to find some shield bosses, spear points, battle axes as well, long swords there. A few more kind of choppy, very choppy sort of axes there for the Visigoths to throw or hurl at people. And then just kind of coming towards the end of it now, there's some phenomenal huge mosaics. Spain, all sorts of over Spain. If you find different museums, you can find some of these tremendously detailed Roman mosaics from some of the great Roman villas and Roman towns that were in Spain at the time. And even the detail on this plinth at the bottom of it is kind of pretty cool. So there's a lot of impressive stuff. This again is a huge thing. I think this is the Visigothic gold hoard. I've got to pronounce that, haven't I? Torridon Jimeno hoard, or Torridon Jimeno hoard. The Visigothic hoard. There's a bigger one at Grazar, founded in that place again, which is now called Jaén, which is much easier. And it's all sorts of pieces here and Madrid. So I may well have seen one in Cordoba. I've not been to Barcelona, but this is just some of it. And the interesting thing is that you can see there's a chain. If you've seen some of my pictures from where Aachen, there's a huge candelabra in the cathedral in Aachen that was a wedding gift, I think, to Charlemagne. So there's absolutely a stylistic continuation all the way through from this amazingly detailed stuff to that whole kind of same sort of thing. From they're believing they're Holy Roman Empire, and here it is in amazing detail. Imagine finding that as an archaeologist. That's like, well, that's literally hitting gold, isn't it? And going back a few more great super detailed mosaics, tying with the bird watching theme of part of the trip for sure. And then a little bit more, these people doing cool different stuff. Can't remember, there was probably something that explained what this was, but I can't remember what it was. But there it is. It was just a very impressive bit of mosaic, and again, huge pieces that they've put down and recreated very well. That's the sort of scale with people in it that you're looking at for this one. So that's vast, isn't it? That's kind of 6 foot sort of there, really, pretty much. So it's a huge thing. It's a phenomenal museum. Definitely worth going to if you're in Spain, if you're in Madrid. Hunt it out. Make sure you get to the Archaeological Museum, and of course there's much more than this. This is just me picking some random wargamey stuff, but I hope you've enjoyed it.
This means war.